Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. I love it when I see everyone jumping on as soon as we get started. So thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us today. This is the Her Version platform. It's built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named Tana Macpherson-Smith. Tana has been through a whirlwind of life as a born people pleaser. She has had the weight of the entire world sitting on her shoulders at different times throughout her life, dealing with her mother, her own mental wellness, and everything in between. Psych wards, therapy, and meditation were her first encounters with personal development. She has gained an education as an adolescent and parent coach, a mental health first aid England trainer, a Psych-Tap, EFT and NLP Practitioner, and a Reiki Master. We are thrilled to hear about her and how she has evolved through her journey. Welcome, lady. How are you? Can you hear me? Oh, she can't hear me.
I'm really good. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Really
Sounds
lovely
good.
to be here.
Did I pronounce your name right? Was it Tanya?
No, it's Tana.
Tana. So sorry, it's Tana. Tana, for everybody listening, her website is in the description, and it's also linked right above her face area. So as we're talking, we're diving into her story and her journey. And if it resonates with you, make sure you check out her website and her social media. It looks like she just walked off. Tanya. I hate that when I mispronounce the names. I think I might have even just mispronounced it again. Tana. It's Tana, not Tanya. Tana. I did the phonetical to how you say it phonetically on my word verbiage, and I still mispronounced it. It's one of those things when you're dealing with people with all kinds of names for all different types of places. I think she is from, where is she from? England. She's actually from England, and it looks like she's having a little bit of issues with her internet right now. So let's grab her back. Could you hear me okay, or was it all staticky when I was introducing you?
Just disappeared completely.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I could see you perfectly, so it should be fine, but
I'm just getting double of everything.
Double hearing, like audio.
Right, let's see what happens now.
Okay, can you hear me okay right now? She can't hear.
I'm still double hearing,
like an echo.
It's repeating just after you've spoken. Let's try again.
I'm repeating. You're not repeating?
That's better. That's better.
Really?
Yes. We can start again. Sorry.
That's okay.
Don't know what was going on.
That's okay. It happens sometimes, and it's really no big deal. I've gotten used to it and no longer get that pitter patter in my throat anymore because it doesn't really matter. But I'm so glad that you are here and you're taking some time out of your day to hang out with us. You're from England.
Yes.
So it's a whole nother time zone over there. What time is it over there?
It's actually 2:00 in the afternoon, so it's very civilized.
I love it. I love it. I am East Coast, so it's 9 a.m. here. And for those listening in California, it's like 6 a.m. or something crazy right now. So for those of you listening overseas, thank you for being here. And for those of you that are in the US, hanging out with us, thank you so much for coming on and listening. So I want to jump right in. And I would love to just kind of open up to hearing just a little bit of background about your journey and then kind of dive into some awesome, juicy questions I have for you. Is that cool?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about you.
So I was a teacher for 25 years, which was something I absolutely loved with a passion. And I found that everything that I was doing was finding really creative ways of helping teenagers to come out of the shadows and know who they were. But in 2013, completely unexpectedly at the time, I had a massive mental breakdown. It was not anything that I'd anticipated or my family. It happened literally on a moment's notice. And I was sent into a psychiatric unit for 3 days of assessment, which resulted in a 6-month stay in a psychiatric hospital and completely changed the course of my life and what I'm doing. And, you know, it's nothing that I would ever have chosen to have done. And I certainly wouldn't have chosen to have experienced what I had experienced that led up to that moment. But I can honestly say with my hand on heart that I would not have changed it for the world. It was the greatest privilege of my life to go through that crisis.
What did that look like? Was that crying? Was that throwing things? Was that stopping mid-traffic? What did you...
I'd become really angry, which is something I've always maintained I don't do. I don't do anger. I've said that a million times. Oh, I don't do anger. I'm not an angry person. But I had found I was becoming increasingly angry, brought about by things that had happened years previously. But I was still holding on to the anger, and I was working ridiculously long hours because I was working in a boarding school, and creating lots of events. And so I was quite often doing over 100 hours a week. So I was tired. I'd also had unexpected surgery. I discovered I had a 10-inch tumor in my pelvis. This was in July 2012. And had to have surgery to remove the tumor and a hysterectomy at the same time. Then 3 weeks later, I had to have surgery for a twisted ovarian cyst. And then a matter of weeks, literally, I was back at my job. And I just crumbled emotionally because I wasn't physically well enough. I didn't have the strength to kind of push the emotional walls away. And I kept going until February 2013. And I got up one morning and I knew I had a full day of teaching, and I knew I couldn't possibly teach the pupils in the mood that I was in, because I had been up all night just really stewing and angry. So I went to a yoga class very early in the morning and nothing changed. And I went onto a treadmill for a while and nothing changed. And I got back into the car just as early. And I was driving home at about 6:45 in the morning on a big dual carriageway on a Friday morning that should have been really busy, and an ambulance coming in the opposite direction suddenly put on its sirens, the lights flashing, and it just took off past me to rescue somebody else.
Yeah.
And it was literally as if someone had pressed a switch. And at that moment, I put my foot on the accelerator and I was accelerating to 80. I certainly got beyond 85 miles an hour. And I was looking for a tree on the side of the road with which to connect. And I need to make it clear that I have never had suicidal tendencies. I have never wanted to end my life at all.
Yeah.
But at that moment, what was in my head was, if I'm injured so badly that I'm in intensive care, then other people will know the damage they've done. Then people will understand the level of pain that I'm in.
Wow.
And it was about making physical what I was feeling emotionally.
Wow.
So in truth, how it happened was this. I'm driving really fast. I see the tree trunk. The last thing I see is the tree trunk in the center of my windscreen. And I go through this whole process of this connection with the tree, feeling my legs break, feeling I've been in this major crash, feeling this blanket come down, and just this yearning to hear the ambulance signals for me coming for me.
Yeah.
What actually happened was that I came to about 200 meters down the road with my car facing the other way on the dual carriageway, having connected with absolutely nothing. And I was physically unharmed, but emotionally absolutely destroyed. I was hysterical. I couldn't stop crying.
Wow.
I had to kind of pull myself together because traffic was beginning to come, and I turned the car around and I limped back to the surgery and went in to see the doctor. And, you know, I've taken a lot of other people to see the doctor, and I'm usually a really bouncy kind of character. And from the minute they opened the door, I just could not stop sobbing. And I was taken in and we had a conversation about it, and I explained what I'd just done. And she said, we need to get a psychiatrist to call you. And I went home. I didn't go to teach. And it kind of took on from there. I had a phone conversation with the psychiatrist, told her what I'd done. She said, we need you to come in for an assessment. So I went straight away that afternoon by train into London. Was very casual about it with my husband, who taught at the same school, and got back and said, you know, they want me to go in for a little assessment on Monday, and I need to take a suitcase for a couple of nights. They're just going to see what's going on, and said goodbye on Monday morning, got the train and disappeared.
Wow.
And that's how it all started. And that was the start of the most extraordinary experience and story, because I went from the fear of genuinely expecting that I was walking into, you know, the corridors of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the film from forever ago.
Everyone thinks about, yeah.
And I discovered everybody else in the hospital felt the same, but that's why I was standing on the doorstep thinking, oh my God, what am I going to see inside?
Yeah.
Reality for me was fortunately very different. Where I was actually really lovely, and I was incredibly well cared for. But what happened in those 6 months was at times very funny, at many times so powerfully painful, so difficult in dealing with stories, things that had happened right back into my early childhood. And I went into periods of complete paralysis in whatever position I was in at the time, just like that. Literally, I would just go into position and I'd be frozen for a couple of hours, unable to move. I tried to self-harm for the first time, and the irony of me having helped all these pupils to not harm themselves.
Yeah.
And me acknowledging that I didn't even know how to start. And that kind of humor of thinking, God, this is pathetic. I don't even know how to do that. There were some beautiful, beautiful moments. And I found my sanctuary and my sort of saving grace by going, I was allowed out for an hour every day once they discovered I was safe enough. And I went to Regent's Park in London and spent an hour every day for 6 months watching the transformation in what happens between the birds and going through mating season and birth of the young and just the change of the flowers. And that really was my sanctuary.
Wow.
So that was kind of the most pivotal period of my life.
Definitely. You were kind of talking about during that, you mentioned stories and connecting with your story and understanding your story, or however you, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What's your thought process on that? You know, being in the arena of podcasting and listening to people's stories, I get two kinds of people. I get people who totally understand the reason why it's important to tell your story. And then I get other people who insist that they are no longer their story and they don't want to tell their story. What's your thought process on that?
That's a really interesting thing. I mean, what I've learned is that I am essentially no longer my story, but my story is proving so powerful in supporting other people, whether that's children, teenagers who I work with at the moment, whether it's their parents, whether it's teachers, because I deliver a lot of work to the teaching education community. And I know for many people, and this is me included, that the story, if it's been lifelong, is so embedded that there's a real fear about letting go of it and having it taken away through therapy or whatever means it can be.
Yeah.
And I remember getting to a period of thinking, I don't know who I'll be if I don't feel this way, because I've always felt this way.
Yeah.
But I have progressed so far and come so far out the other side. But my story is still valid because it's still what made me who I am.
Yeah.
And by sharing it with other people, it's helping them to realize that there is hope for the future. I use my experiences to help them to turn around their thinking completely and to let go of what's gone on in the past, much of which they're not even aware of. And that's one of the key things that I work with, is how much is going on underneath that we don't even know. We don't even know exists.
So do you think that there's a way to almost disconnect from your story, but still be able to tell it?
I don't think I'll ever disconnect from it. There are things that still will bring up real trauma for me, but I just step over it and acknowledge that it's there, give into it sometimes, but just know that by resetting my thinking, where I am now is thinking about now and the future and everything that I want to achieve. So I think if you completely lose your story, it's almost as if you're numbed to it. And I don't think being numb to it is healthy. I think one needs to know it, wear it for a while, but then be able to package it as needed, and then step forward and see how very different life can be without wearing this baggage. And that's the big story that I tell all of my clients.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The one thing I hear a lot is, I don't want to be identified. Like, I don't want that I don't want that story to identify me as a person. And I get it, because sometimes I could see people identifying me as the abuse. She always tells her abuse story. She always tells her sobriety story. She always tells her single mom story. Like, I have 3 main stories that I tell, along with a bunch of other stuff. And I could totally see that. But at the same point, how am I supposed to encourage or help individuals who are going through that right now if I just delete that part of myself? Or not delete it, but just like refuse to talk about that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and I agree entirely. I wouldn't be who I am doing what I'm doing if I was to just push that out of the way and not identify with it.
Exactly.
Because it is everything I've been through, and there's been a lot, is what makes me who I am.
Yeah.
And gives me the power to do what I'm doing. Now that I'm not drowning in it all, it gives me the power to do what I'm doing. And so if I was to just say, that's not me, and I'm just fresh here as a new being, I don't think I would have the impact that I hope that I'm having on the people that I work with.
Yeah. Yeah. That just gave me an epiphany, as far as like, your story gives you your power.
I mean, someone did point out to me today, and not today, so recently, she said, a very, very good friend said to me, oh, but that's just your story. That's just your story. And actually, she was completely right in that point, because I kept going back to saying, I can't do this. And I get worried about doing X and Y and Z because I always fail at the last hurdle. And she said, yes, but that's just your story. And then when I realized how many times I say that, not intentionally as an excuse, but I'm repeating the pattern over and over. My story about what happened is real, but I don't have to live by what I learned as a child.
I love that.
That's the bit that I think you have to let go of.
Yeah. I love that you're saying this, because you have so much, not only experience, but just education in being a mentor or coach or a teacher, however you identify, yet you're still learning.
All the time.
I love that. I love that.
And I have been through many, many therapies, and I've done it not because I'm a therapy junkie, but because I want to understand
Yeah.
all that there is available, so that I can understand how people can heal in different ways and what's appropriate for one person and good for another. And it is quite extraordinary that every single week I'm learning something different, and I'm finding another tool and seeing the power of a different way of thinking, or a different way of working. And I just find this the most exciting period of my education ever. It feels like there's a real point to what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And
I
just want to know. I want to know it all. I want to understand and keep learning. I'll never know it all. I just want to keep learning.
Totally. I agree with that. I want to talk about, obviously you've been through all sorts. The one story that you just, opened up with us about. Thank you for sharing that. But what would you consider the biggest challenge that you've been through?
That period and
wow.
the years afterwards is obviously huge.
The biggest challenge.
But
what was the overall moral? What did you learn overall from all of that?
From that experience, I learned what I teach now to children and the way that I teach it. And that is about understanding how and why so many of us have mental health problems, whether we're children, teenagers or adults, and why it's starting earlier and earlier, younger and younger. And for me, definitely, it started very early for me. And that is, my early childhood was probably my biggest challenge, which led to, I suppose, what became ultimately an even bigger challenge. But what it's all led me to understand in really uncovering the impact of my childhood and what it had on me, and how that has lasted my lifetime, and how that shaped how I responded to the world as I grew up, is this story that I tell that I call my monkey wisdom, which I think really makes it very clear to so many people about how and why they may have the issues, or why they respond to colleagues in the way that they do, or why they treat their children in the way they do. And that's another story. I don't know if you want me to go into that now, or if you want me to talk about that.
Whatever.
How I would explain it is this, and this is what I've fundamentally kind of worked out for myself, is that I see every person as a tapestry. Now, these days, I have to explain quite carefully what that is to younger children, because it's just not in our teaching much at the moment. But I see you as an outline of a person. But inside you are filled with millions of stitches, like threads, like stitches. And that each of us is born with an inner monkey that lives with us for our whole lives. And the inner monkey has a personality of its own that's been developed through your life experiences. And I say that every monkey has a bag of very well-worn crayons. We can talk to people and say, what is the tragedy? What is the issue? What's happened to you in your life that's caused you to be the way that you are? And for many, there has been major trauma. The things that have been obvious, whether it's abuse, or they've been in a war situation, or they've been in a big accident, or lost a relative, whatever it might be. But for the majority of us, there aren't major obvious points. It's a collation of early life experiences within the first sort of 7 years or so, the tiniest ones. So, for example, you've got a baby that can hear the family next door. It's crying. The family are too busy. It's not they're being cruel. They're not doing anything deliberate. They're just too busy to come in. And I say to kids, how does the monkey feel? How do you feel? How would the baby feel? And they'll say sad, or unloved, or not important. I say, well, how would that make the baby feel emotionally? And they say, okay, it's unloved. What color does unloved look like? It can be a different color to every person, but let's say it's dark blue. Okay. So the monkey will color a thread dark blue for that experience, to record the emotional impact of that minute experience. Say that happens quite often, the monkey's going to color it each time, because it creates that feeling of not being good enough. Then that child is potty trained, and there's a big family gathering, and it's a really wonderful afternoon. Everyone's drinking and having a barbecue, and the little boy realizes he needs the potty, and he can't find it, and he's pulling on people's shirts, and everyone's too busy to pay him attention, and then he wets his trousers. Everybody looks at him. Now, he's not going to remember this incident as a teenager or as an adult, but the monkey will have recorded how it made him feel. And let's say that it made him feel that no one cared, that he wasn't loved enough because no one paid him the attention to help him. And then they got across with him. So that's another blue line. Now, in between, there's lots of wonderful events that may create yellow or orange or pinks or whatever color for joy and happiness and great times. That little child is at nursery. Children of 3 or 4 come running out of nursery to see whoever's picking them up with their pictures and their stories and their excitement. And all too often we see whoever's meeting them at the gate that they have a mobile phone in their hands and they're going, hang on a minute, I just need to finish this text, or I just need to finish this work email, or I've just got to finish talking to someone. And by the time they've finished, the child's bubble has burst. And the monkey colours it again the same colour because he feels not important enough. So these experiences can go all the way through life. It can be when you don't get picked for the team, or when someone says, I'm having the skinny girl next to the fat one, and the child next to you is selected. It's these things that when they are recorded in this way, they create patches of colour. And if there's a big enough patch of one, what I'll call a negative colour, then that becomes what we call a limiting belief. Beautiful. And you don't need to know every single detail, but we need to know that we can all have limiting beliefs, and we all do have, which usually start with the words, I'm not good enough, ... And it might be to do well enough at school, to meet my parents' expectations, to have friends, to be in the team, to be a success, to run my own company. And fundamentally, I'm not good enough to be loved. And that's really what has come out through all the exploration of me literally taking my life apart from the moment I was born to understand every stage, to understand why I became someone who was susceptible to influences, interactions with men that I did not want throughout my lifetime, how I became susceptible to being bullied severely as an adult, why I have such a need to support children and teenagers to be amazing, to come out of the shadows and know who they are. And I understand all of that now by understanding what my tapestry looks like and what the monkey's been colouring in. And it's just a really powerful way of seeing things.
Absolutely. Definitely. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. What's your thought process on, I mean, obviously you yourself are into personal development, personal growth. What's your thought process on people diving into that? Would you say that it's important, it's medium, it's not really that important, but if you like it? What's your take on the importance of it in someone's life?
I think it's really helpful for people to understand their behavior patterns, and you can understand that by really digging down and knowing what your monkey's been making note of, because what your monkey does for your whole life is try to protect you. It doesn't appear like that, but for example, I know a boy who was fine until he was 9, and then he was told that he had very severe dyslexia and was bullied mercilessly by the other children because he was suddenly doing baby work. So his monkey noted all of that, and that felt really painful. So when he went to secondary school, his monkey said, we're going to get out there and be the bully, then we can't get hurt. So the monkey's looking at everyone and going, that kid looked at you in such a way, we'll have him later. And so this teenager develops this anger response to everything, and he has to be in power. So that when he goes on to work later in life, his response to other people will be based on what's happened and what his monkey has recorded for him earlier in life and how the monkey's trying to protect him. Another child who loves reading books but is in a school where everybody's really sporty and is teased for being a bookworm. Yeah. And the monkey just holds him back and says, don't talk about the books, don't tell anybody what you do. In fact, don't really talk to many people because it's much safer just to keep to yourself. And so a shyness develops, or a hesitation, or a lack of confidence develops. So the monkeys are really teaching us how to behave in a way that they think is going to protect us. So I do think that people need to dig deep in order to be able to step out of the muck and actually make a decision for how they want life to change, how they want it to be different.
Yeah, I totally agree with that 100%. You know, while you were living out some of these journeys and some of these challenges that you went through in your life, and now kind of looking back at them, is there a step by step that you've kind of recognized to be able to pull yourself from a dark spot into a more brighter or lighter spot that you could share with us?
Yeah, for me, it was, I mean, obviously for me, it all started with doing that real self-exploration in hospital and going through a lot of therapy and experiencing all that brought with it. But when I came out of hospital, I, for all sorts of reasons, felt that going back to the career that I loved was not feasible and that I needed to take time out to properly heal, because going back and giving yourself to other people all the time was so demanding.
Yeah.
So I started to really explore, you know, like with a panic, like, what am I going to do now? I don't have my job anymore. I don't have the passion anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. So whilst I was doing the therapy and exploring how I felt about everything and why, and trying to get the energy of the hurt and the pain and the sadness and the grief and everything else to come out, I remember being in a very dark place over Christmas and thinking, I've got no income and we've got the family. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And it so happened that I saw an advertisement for a coaching free weekend to go and see what it was like to learn to be a coach. And that was eye-opening for me, because I was with other people from all over the world for a whole weekend doing all these exploratory exercises. And it was very emotional, but incredibly freeing. And I came away and thought, you know, now I know that I need to change the way that I think. I want to train as a coach. I want to understand. I want to start learning different techniques and therapies. So for me, it was about getting myself immersed into a whole new area of education, you know, finding a purpose, something that I could really focus on so that I wasn't always just wallowing in the past.
Yeah.
So then, that took me into doing more exercise and getting out in nature and realizing that how incredibly wonderful nature is. And then I did a whole process of training with an organization called Natural Success that was all about understanding your whole spirit and what drives you, and about choosing what you want to happen in your life, choosing the life you want to have, and the understanding that everything is a choice.
Yeah.
We have a choice whether we get straight out of bed in the morning or we decide we're going to linger longer. We have a choice about whether we can do or we can't. Every single thing is a choice. And for me, learning that every moment of the day is a choice and that I'm in control of that was a really big stepping point. So I've done a lot of therapy. I exercise a lot. I try to eat healthily, but that doesn't last very long. That's one thing I haven't quite conquered yet.
Yes.
I get out in nature. I am embraced in my spiritual development. I've surrounded myself with people from whom I just learn every minute of the day. And yes, I keep revisiting what's gone on, because it's building the picture of who I am exactly, why I respond to the world, and therefore what I can teach other people. So
Definitely.
yeah.
I love that you're saying we have choices. I remember when I first acknowledged that fact that to some people seems so obvious, but I had no idea that I could make a choice. I don't know what I thought. Like, looking back, it just sounds so silly to me. Like, how could you not know that you have a choice? But there was an actual real moment in time. I don't necessarily remember the exact moment, but I remember actually recognizing, like, I have a choice. I can choose to stay or to go or to do or to not, or to yes or to no. And
Yeah.
it's such an interesting an easy thought process that so many people don't recognize.
Yeah. Yeah. And children don't realize that actually they have a choice about so much. I mean, we all have things that happen to us that we can't control if you're in a car crash. But what happens in our early lives determines how one person will cope with a serious injury and the next person won't cope with the same injury. And it all goes back to where we were in the beginning, and then making a choice where possible to do something different, to wallow with the illness, or to step out of it and go, right, I'm going to make my life work regardless of the pain or the limitations or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. How have your children, I just checked to make sure you had children before I asked this question, but how do you think your children have benefited from you being in this arena?
I think, I mean, obviously the actual incident where I was in hospital impacted them massively. They were 18 and 23 at the time, I think, and that had a huge impact, understandably. But I think I've always been somebody who has time for children and really is open and honest. I've always been a storyteller. All through my teaching, I was telling stories in every lesson to help children to open up and recognize things in themselves and feel confident in speaking openly. And so I think I've always been that way with my own children. And I mean, it's lovely because they both respond very differently to what I now believe to be true and what I do. I think they're both immensely proud of where I've come and what I'm doing. My son is very, he's maths, science and sport, and very methodical in what he sees. And so I think he thinks a lot of what I do is, out there with the fairies. My daughter has kind of been around it a lot more because she's lived with us for longer. And I think intuitively, she's very much on the same page.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow. Very cool. How old
but they never like me to talk about them.
How old are your kids now?
Oh, gosh, 27 and 32. Wow. And I have an 18-month-old grandson. So
does the time fly? My son's 18 and I feel like it just flew.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So but how much, the whole relationship shifts and changes, but we all go through everything together, and to be a part of that, watching their journey is so exciting. I love it. Yeah. I love it. You go through the pain bits with them as well. That's never easy. And my issue is that I have to try really hard not to interfere and jump in with solutions and just let them live their life and do what they need, and they can come for help if they want it.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a jump in and I'll sort it for you.
Yeah, that was one thing that my parents do, is they've always been that way. They don't micromanage. Obviously when I was growing up, very much so micromanaged a lot. But after I left, they kind of just left me to my own, which I don't know if I necessarily appreciated at one point. I felt, I don't want to say I felt unloved, but kind of felt unloved. But now looking back, I appreciate it because I can call my mom and tell her a story, and she doesn't feel as if she needs to give advice. She just listens to the story, which I appreciate.
Yeah. And that's one of the things for me is that, and that I remember the penny dropping about why I deal with teenagers the way that I do, and why I've worked so hard to give them the opportunity to come out of the shadows and know who they are, and for people to know who they are, because I've always felt invisible, and I didn't realize that that's why I was trying to make them visible, because of my own belief that I'm invisible.
Wow.
And that's come from, it's nobody's fault. Nobody's done anything for that to happen. There's just been incidents of feeling that, and it's played out all the way through my life, and I find it really bizarre. So do my friends. When I was a child, when my mum was pregnant with me, my dad told me that she had it confirmed to her that she had a life-changing illness, and that she was going to become completely paralyzed, and that happened, I suppose, within about, I don't know, 15 months, 18 months, I don't know exactly, of my being born, that she was quadriplegic, so she was paralyzed from the neck down. So she was in our sitting room on a bed with an armchair back, and I became the storyteller. For me, that's where I know it started, that I was the chatterbox, the bossy boots, the everything else. And as this small child, I used to run in and climb all over her and just tell her about everything that was going on in my day. Poor woman. And I have a large family. I've got 6 brothers and sisters. It's all complicated history, but they are huge for me. We're just a big family. And my mum was told that she was going to become paralyzed and that she was going to die. And I can't imagine what that would be like when her children at the time were 5 and 3, or 5 and 2, and me, being pregnant with me. And she never believed that she was going to die, but she did. She died just before my 8th birthday. And I only realized probably about 6 months ago that the biggest deal for me, I always thought logically that I had believed that if I was the goodest girl I could possibly be, if I was really, really good, I would make her better and she would survive. What I now understand was my belief was that I knew she was going to die, but I thought that if I was really, really good, the goodest I could be, if she died, she would take me with her. And of course she couldn't do that. So that was incredibly traumatic because we all knew she was going to die. And in those days, there were no counselors or anything else. I had wonderful people in my life, but there was no talking about her after she died. That was kind of end of the story. Wow. So all that emotion got buried. And bizarre though this may sound, for about 6 weeks or so, I didn't want to cry in front of anybody. But I cried at night, and this hatch used to open in my ceiling, and she would lean down and I would hold her hand, and I would cry and cry and cry. And then the hatch door would start to close, and I'd literally get pulled off my bed, holding onto her hand, and then she'd disappear. And that lasted for about 6 weeks. And I think, despite having a wonderful, loving family and an amazing stepmom and everything, I've always been searching for my place. I think to a small child, to that inner monkey that I had, my brother and sister were then sent immediately to boarding school. So I kind of was bereaved 3 times over because they went out of my life. My father was working 12 hours a day to keep us afloat.
Totally. Yeah.
So in my mind, I wasn't good enough for mum to stay. I wasn't good enough for my brother and sister because they left. I wasn't good enough for dad because he was away at work all the time. And so that belief that I'm not good enough has played all the way through. And now I understand why I've worked so hard to make sure that other kids and other teenagers don't feel that way.
Wow.
That whatever's going on at home, whatever's going on in their lives, however they've been bullied at school or whatever, they are genuinely loved. And they are, however bad the kids have been that I've worked with, however terrible things they've done, and some of them have really done some awful things, all I see is just this beautiful person. Every kid is beautiful. They're not born bad.
Yeah.
Life happens.
Yeah. 100%. Wow. Very powerful. Thank you for sharing. What's the number one lesson you've learned from life?
Gosh, that's a good question. That we are who we are because of what we've been through. But that isn't who we have to be. That always remains at the heart of who we are. But actually, we really do have the choice to choose the future that we want. And by making that choice and by immersing ourselves in our imaginations, probably what number one lesson is, our imaginations are pretty much the answer to everything. And immerse yourself in the belief that you have what it is you want in your life right now. you start to see things really changing. So I think it's the power of the imagination, and we can heal so much with that. And we should encourage children to make believe all the time, to tell their monkeys all the time that they can do French, they can do their maths, that they're brilliant at reading, and to get a grip on our monkeys and teach them to help us to see that we can do absolutely anything. And I really believe that. I believe that whoever we are, we can actually do absolutely anything.
That's awesome. I want to give a shout out real fast to those that are watching live. Thank you so much for hanging out and listening in to all these beautiful stories and journeys that we're listening to right now. While we have such a large crowd hanging out with us, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what you do and your company, your website, how we can find you, all that stuff.
Okay, so in 2015, I launched a company called Clear Minds Education, which for me is all about helping children, teenagers, and anybody who lives with parents, teaches them to really understand what emotional and mental well-being is actually about in a way that is understandable for anybody. And I'm really on a mission to, it sounds so pretentious, but I genuinely am on a mission to change the face of mental health for future adult generations by starting from the grassroots up, by literally starting from conception onwards, and helping people to understand that even actually pre-conception, what's happened in our genetic history, what experiences our forebears have had, really can impact our emotional and mental capacity going through life. So what I do with the company is I go into schools and I run inset training for teachers, and I do presentations and workshops for parents and for children from the ages of 5 to, actually I do it at university as well, so right the way through the spectrum. And I teach about the monkey on the shoulder, and I help people to understand what's happened in their background, why the way they are, why they respond to life in the way that they do, why our experience is the way, it's about communication. It's why the way we communicate with each other as adults, but particularly as adults to children and children to each other, why that is so critical to the way that we develop and the future life that we have. So on the one side, it's education and helping people to understand who they are and to change the way that we communicate. And on the other side, it is about working one-to-one with children or with families and helping them to really acknowledge the pain that they're in, the trauma that they've been through, and why explaining to them so they understand that they have this monkey, and to create, and this works for whether you're 18 or 5, understanding the monkey and what's driving it, and therefore what's driving you, and that you can take control. Can I just give a quick example?
Yeah.
I was working with a 16-year-old girl, really lovely girl, who had wet the bed her entire life. So had no sleepovers, no staying with friends, no friends staying over, because she was so ashamed and so humiliated by the experience. And she'd been to lots of hospitals, and they said there was nothing physically wrong with her, and effectively that was, you're going to have to deal with it. We spent 4 weeks together initially, and I helped her to understand why it had started, and it was to do a lot with things that had happened in her with her father, and with pressure that she put under, and her need to be perfect to please him. And then I started changing the way that she thought, and we talked about the monkey, and I said, you have to every single day do this work, morning and night, that you write down what 3 things would it make, how would you feel if you were dry? And she thought about it and said, I'd be free, I'd be proud, and I'd be ecstatic. And I said, so every day you literally write it out 20 times in the morning, 20 times in the evening, that I am so proud of myself for being dry. I'm ecstatically happy and I feel free. And she did that. And she wrote more and more every morning and every night. It was the last thing before she went to bed. It took 4 weeks. And then she was completely dry.
Wow.
And that is about knowing where you're coming from, but stepping out of the pain and changing your thinking and choosing that this is not going to be your story for the rest of your life. And the impact that's had on her has been phenomenal.
Wow.
So
And she was 16, you said?
Yeah. And that had been 16 years worth of struggle, and 14 years, I suppose, of struggle, and 4 weeks of changing her life.
Wow. That's
So
beautiful.
that's my aim is I want to speak on the international stage. I want to share my learning, my story, and my vision for the future, and how we can get there, how we can change lives by changing what we say to people, by changing the way we communicate, by thinking about what we're doing, by understanding the impact of even what seems like the most insignificant bullying or name calling, and helping kids not to wear this armor, this weight of material that has all these knives stuck in it from past experience.
Yeah, definitely.
I've just finished my first book, which is all about this.
Do you have it? Is it?
It's not published yet. I have actually got a pending film deal for it, but I'm just waiting for the publishing side of it. But that's a novel for teenagers, where 8 teenagers, all with the common problems that we see all the time, come together on the north coast of Scotland for a personal development training. And it's there that they're introduced to their inner monkeys, and they come to understand why they react in the way they do to the world. And they go on huge adventures and come to such recognition about themselves and about their relationship with the world and with each other and with their parents.
That's awesome.
So
Key being with their parents. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, because so many individuals, teenagers, they start to fall away from their parents because there's so much hurt and trauma that's not recognized, Yeah, you don't, as parents, you don't necessarily know that you're causing strife in their child's life. So that's awesome. Wow, that's powerful.
There is a particular part about exactly that. These kids on the last challenge have to wear these really heavy rucksacks that they're not allowed to open until they get instruction, and they end up having to go through this really dark cave, and the sea's coming in and it's pitch dark, and they're on their own, 11 to 17-year-olds on their own, having to find their way through. And they've been wearing these things all day, and they come to a vertical ladder up this kind of well, and they have to help each other to climb up. And at the first level, there's a notice, there's a kind of a cave that they can go into, and they're exhausted and cold. And there's a note that says you can unzip the first layer, and they unzip it, and they're carrying these clay weights. And round them are the letters that they wrote to themselves on the first day of the course, telling their future self what they thought about themselves, these really damning, condemning letters. And the whole point being is that we carry the weight of everything we dislike about ourselves on our shoulders all the time. And then they eventually manage to get themselves to the top, to the opening, where they're allowed to open and unzip another layer, and there's another whole pack of clay weights. And they go, what is this? And they discover that their parents have been on a similar training at the same time, and they have written letters to their children explaining their backgrounds and what has held them back, and therefore their contribution to the way their children feel and reconnecting. So and what we're showing is that that we carry the weight of our parents' issues on our shoulders, knowingly or unknowingly. That's on there too. And when you can shed those, then you can step into the light and do absolutely anything you want.
Beautiful. How would somebody do that? How would somebody even begin to find out what weights their parents are holding, like in real life? How would one do that?
I mean, it's not possible for everybody to have a real heart-to-heart with their parents.
Yeah.
It's really not. And for some of us, you're never going to know the intricacies. But in reflecting on the way that your parents behave, parents that are bullying or aggressive or so on, do so because there's experiences in their past that have caused that to be their defense mechanism, that to be their safe way of going through life. And in understanding and recognizing your parents' behaviors, it helps you to recognize where that pattern has either reflected in yourself or where that you have pushed hard against it.
For sure.
And I worked with a 21-year-old who had a very dark life for very many reasons. And he worked on a building site because that's all he was capable of doing at the time. And we talked about the monkey a lot. And he came in one day and he was just glowing. And I said, I've seen it. I said, seen what? He said, I suddenly noticed that all the 8 guys on the building site, all I could see was their monkeys. All I could see was the bully baboon in this guy and why he's like this. And the guy, why he takes the bullying and why he never reacts and what his monkey looked like. He said, I've just seen everybody's monkeys. And it makes so much sense. And so knowing that, he was able to start engaging with his own and recognizing the bad stuff that he does and where that related to his parenting, and actually feeling some empathy for his father, for the treatment that he got, by recognizing that, his father was wearing a great cape full of daggers himself.
Absolutely.
It's invigorating, it's complicated, but it's just so exciting to be on that journey with people.
Yeah, definitely. So those of you that are watching live, those of you that are watching on the replay, clearminds.org, which is right above the box right there. Check it out. Is your social media on there if individuals wanted to check you out?
Yes, it is. And I've also on LinkedIn, just as Tana Macpherson-Smith.
Beautiful.
All one word, no hyphens or anything, just Tana Macpherson-Smith.
Awesome.
And there's quite a lot about me on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
And equally with some podcasts that I've done, some which is beginning to tell my story, but also interviewing people who have come through a huge amount and are doing amazing work that I admire. So anyone can look those up, again, under my name.
That's great. What does success mean to you?
2 levels. On a personal level, success for me would really be to have a family home in the country where all the people we love just love to come. Home to me is probably the most significant and important place in the world. I would love to be able to travel with our family, which is something we were never really able to do. Success for me in fulfilling what I'm here to do would be to really be changing lives through my books and through speaking on the international stage and getting people to really consider how they communicate and the impact of every tiny thing that happens in our interaction with any other person, whatever the age they are, but particularly with children. And just to leave a legacy where people change the way that they think, see the world differently, and understand how to acquaint themselves with their monkeys and therefore take control of their lives and be who they're meant to be.
That's great. What's some advice you'd give to individuals listening right now who are struggling with really finding their true self? What should their first step be? What should they kind of be looking into?
I think first actually is to write down as much as you can about yourself, to really acknowledge what's going on in yourself, and to be honest about your behavior patterns and your thinking. It doesn't happen overnight. Probably the most important thing is about making a decision that you really want to do this, that you really want to understand who you are, and that it is really possible to make change. I think really help determining too what it is you actually want in your life, and that's with no shame about if it's wanting huge wealth or whatever it might be. It's what are you actually, if I had a magic wand and I could wave it for you or any of the people who are listening and make anything happen, what would they absolutely love to have in their lives or to be doing with their lives? What do they want to achieve? Because until you know that, it's really hard to even know what you're working towards, and then to start living your life as if you've got it already, however far away that might be. I actually did this. I did a test on this years ago to see technically how powerful this was.
Okay.
Is there time just to share very quickly?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So my daughter was about 13 at the time, and we hadn't been on holiday for years because we didn't have any money. I told myself that repeated story because when we were young, we didn't have much money. We had an incredible life, but money was scarce, and we were always aware that we couldn't spend money. So my underlying belief is that I don't deserve money and I have to give it to other people. Okay, so we never had any money, and every year all the pupils would come back and say they'd been on these incredible holidays, or they'd ask us and say, "Where are you going, Mrs. Mack? Where are you going?" And I'd go, "We're not going anywhere. We haven't got any money." And so I'm repeating the story. I'm holding myself in my past belief. So I decided that we had to change that. And I said, right, I want to trial this way of thinking. I'm telling you now that we are going to go abroad this summer. We are going somewhere where there's a beach, where there's a beautiful pool. We are going on holiday abroad. My husband goes, really? What with? And I said, just join the game. Come on board. Tell everybody we're going abroad. It doesn't matter, we don't know where it is yet. Let's just see what happens. And I got my daughter to do the same, and we all talked about it all the time. My son was already going on a big trip with school. And I started behaving as if it was actually happening. So we talked about it. We told everybody. I packed the suitcase. I changed the passports, got everything sorted. And 2 weeks after I packed the suitcase and changed the passport, a colleague and friend came in and said, we've just had some money come to us. We've booked a beautiful big gîte in France with a pool. We really want you and our daughter, our daughters were best friends. We want you to come on holiday. We don't want you to pay anything. Yes. The same afternoon, I got a phone call from somebody who, a pupil that I taught, whose father is a very prominent figure. And she phoned, and I thought something had happened. And she said, "Oh, no, Mum's on the phone. We just wanted to tell you, you've been mentoring me for 4 years, and we just wanted to thank you and to tell you that Dad's booked you a 5-star hotel in Mallorca for a week for you and your husband." So on the same day, we were given 2 holidays, one on the beach with a pool and one with a pool, and we had the most incredible time. So when we came back, I went, yeah, but that could have been a fluke. I'm not sure about this. Should we try it really properly? So I said to my daughter, I'll take you away in February half term, in the week in half term. Anywhere you want to go, where do you want? And she went, I want to go to New York. I want to shop on Fifth Avenue. And I just went, oh my God, that's such a huge ask.
And specific.
So specific. And it's like, and I'm immediately thinking the flights are, £1,200 or something, and we've got no money. And I said, right, okay, enough of that. I'm taking you to New York in February half term. We have to behave every day. We have to explore it. We know what we're doing. We've got to plan it. So every day we spent time on the internet, and we explored Broadway and all the sites and the restaurants and the places and the hotels and the places we could stay. And we planned everything. And how she started doing little jobs for people, looking after dogs, taking them for walks, cleaning flats and things to earn money, because she wanted to spend her own money on Fifth Avenue. Okay, so unrelated, out of the blue, I get an invitation to go to a ball at Madame Tussauds in London, which is an extraordinary facility. Never been to a ball there, but I used to organise a lot of balls, so I thought it would be really fun to go. This was from a school I taught at. I hadn't had contact with for 10 years.
Okay.
This is relevant. Go to the ball. Wish I hadn't, because I didn't know virtually anybody. Mm-hmm. But we played a fundraising game at the beginning called Heads and Tails. And essentially 650 people started playing the game, and it got down to 8 people on stage, and I was one of them. And then it got down to 2 people on stage, the 2 people standing, a gentleman and me. And he said, you go first. I had to guess whether a coin being tossed was going to be heads or tails. I said, it's heads. He said, it's tails. It was heads. And there was a big Jeroboam of champagne on the stage, which we'd all been talking about. And I said, oh, is that my prize? And the host went, no, it's a week for 2 in New York. And that Easter, I took my daughter to New York, and we did all the things that we'd planned, and we didn't pay a thing.
Wow.
Now, that was really what started my journey into exploring this in real depth. Because I realized the power of our thinking. And that's what I teach children.
Wow.
So
Powerful.
there you have it, warts and all.
Absolutely powerful. Wow. For those of you that stayed and listened, that was awesome. Sometimes right about an hour, people start dropping off.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Super powerful. Anyone that wants to get in touch with Tana, sorry.
like banana.
Tana. Okay, there we go. Okay. Clearminds.org. Her social media is on there. Check out her LinkedIn. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate all of this. This was so fantastic. Do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I suppose really my focus is just children everywhere, and to really consider whatever children you have in your life through whatever capacity is the way that you communicate with them, and to understand that everything gets taken on board, and anything that is repeated, a behavior pattern, a way that you speak to them, something that you say to them, money doesn't grow on trees, anything repeated often enough will be colored in by the monkey according to the reaction it has. So just think about how your words or behaviors fall on any children that you're working with, and know that the monkey is recording the impact of that feeling. And if repeated often enough, that can create something that will hold them back for a lifetime. Absolutely. So it's really about, let's all check our communication.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate you and the time that you gave to us. For those of you watching live, thank you for being here and hanging out with us as always. For those of you watching on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay so that we know where you are watching us at and we can shoot you some love. This community is expanding every single day, and it's filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at heraversion.life. Once again, my name is Sabrina Victoria, and I am the host of this podcast. And I'm so grateful to be here, sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire